Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today I'll be showing you the best to worst armors in Tarkov's patch 14 with as much understanding as we've been able to gather so far. My criteria is primarily actual protection, especially around the thorax and to some extent the neck too, which drives our initial extremely harsh cut of the list. There are quite a few armors that I think are now basically just completely useless in the game, and that is the Hex Grid, the TTSK, the plate frame, this is the Cry Precision CPC, the HBC, and the MBSS. What is wrong with these five? Well, they don't have any soft armor at all. If you go in game and hover over the tooltip for armor areas, you can see that there is no soft armor whatsoever. So all these have is the front plate and back plate hitboxes, and that is it. The ramification here is that if you get shot around the front plate, which is a smaller area than the thorax hitbox, then you can die in 2 shots to basically any ammo in the entire game, which is a huge disadvantage of these. And given that there are armors that give front plate and back plate and have soft armor, I don't think there's any reason to ever use these ever. Before we continue, have you ever uploaded a video to social media only to have it taken down due to copyright? The risk of getting your content taken down, especially for hobbyists these days, is why today's video is sponsored by Filmora, an easy to use video editor in which the latest version 13 comes with an AI music generator. Let's say you're trying to make a short highlight of a tidy 3-man wipe on streets, but you want something epic to go with it. Without having to search through hundreds of tracks on YouTube's audio library or chance it with a supposedly copyright-free track that you've downloaded from the internet, instead you can generate it right in Filmora. We go audio, tool, start, pick a genre, length of track, and a number of options to make, and then you'll be able to pick, download, and use the one that suits best. If we didn't pick the exact right length, we can use the AI audio stretch to fit the music without messing it up. Just click the track, use audio stretch tool, and voila! This works for extending tracks as well, which is honestly pretty neat. Now let's say I want to remove my talking at the start of the clip, and I didn't record it on 2 channels. We right click, we press AI vocal remover, which separates it into 2 clips, one with voice and one with the rest. From there, we can edit it as if we'd recorded them separately from the start. If either track is still noisy due to the source not being recorded very well, there's a ton of options for AI speech enhancement specifically for talking tracks, or wind, hum, reverb, and hiss removal that you can use to tidy it up and get professional sounding audio. If you're recording from 2 sources, you can actually synchronize these together really easily. This is very useful if you want to record on a mobile device as well as on a computer at the same time, and you can flick back and forth between the 2 without having to synchronize everything up. Finally, we have the audio visualizer that works best for music tracks. Just go into effects, audio effects, and drag one that looks interesting onto the timeline. For this track, I've added the iridescent circle 3, and we can change the intensity, size, and position here, which looks really cool. If you edit even infrequently, Filmora is worth a try as it's quick and easy to get started. Download it for free today using my link below, and you get 100 AI credits to test out the more advanced features when you begin. Ooh! Oh, baby! Now, interestingly, there is a second set of these as well that do technically have soft armor, but the soft armor is over the plate area as well. It doesn't cover the thorax hitbox, and again, if you go over the tooltip and hover over, you can see that only front plate and back plate are protected, and that is even if it doesn't have plates inside, which means that the soft armor is just covering that front plate and back plate hitbox and not the actual thorax, which again leaves you exposed to getting shot from the front, around the sides, and at the top of the hitbox. Unfortunately, this includes quite a lot of rigs and some other armors like the Slick. We have the Tagilla rig, we have another one of the Goons rigs, we have the AACPC, the TacTech, the Ars Armor A18, the TV110, Banshee, MMAC, Drantog, and TV115. This may seem extremely harsh, but this is for exactly the same reasons as for the first set of 5. There is no reason to use an armor that doesn't have soft protection over at least the thorax. There are lots of armors that do that, and there's honestly no reason why you would want to leave any of your thorax completely unprotected by anything. With any of these armors, if 2 pellets of Magnum buckshot come from a scav, you'll instantly die if they hit your thorax hitbox. If a scav shoots you from close range with an SKS with 762 HP and it hits just above the armor plate, you will die. So I think that all of these are completely useless because there are very cheap armors that are better coverage than this that stop you dying to stupid stuff like that. So the next grouping is pretty obvious. This is class 2 armor only, and I'm going to put these in D, and it does feel weird to be putting a Packer above a Slick, but these all cover the actual thorax hitbox with at least class 2. So if you get buckshotted by a scav directly from the front and it hits the front thorax hitbox, you won't die, unlike with the Slick. Both the Packer and the Rivals Packer are basically the same armor. The Module 3M and the 6B2 are all of the same form. The only thing about the 6B2 is that it doesn't have side protection, but at this level, it doesn't really matter, and it's the cheapest, so it's usually the one that I pay for in the very, very early game. Next, we're going to look at armors with other kinds of soft armor that is better than Class 2. I'm still going to group these in D because I don't think that they're that good, because Class 3 in and of itself isn't really that great. There is only one outlier, which is this one, the 6B3TM. I'm still going to stick this into D tier because, yes, it does have Class 4 all over the front, but it it is only class 2 at the back and it has no neck protection either. So I think that this one is quite exposed, so I'm still going to stick it in D, but I'm going to put it as the best of the D tier. The other ones in here are the DRD, which is class 3 everywhere, which isn't too terrible, and it's really low weight as well. And then we have the UN armor and the Korakulon. These are progressively getting higher in terms of weight. The Korakulon weighing a metric ton, whereas the DRD is super light. So if you want to pick something that's class 3 everywhere, then the DRD is probably your best bet. These armors are really for fighting scavs. Against players, they're probably just going to go through all the armor that you present them in this particular scenario, whether you have neck protection or not, class 3 or class 2. It probably doesn't really matter. So if you're hunting scavs in a non-PvP area and you're suppressed, then maybe these are a choice for you early on, but don't expect to survive against players for very long using any of these. I'm also going to put the basic Yule in between these two as well, because this has class 3 on the front and class 2 on the back, so it's pretty much strictly worse than the 6B 3TM, but you do get class 2 neck, so that puts it very slightly above these, but a little bit lower than these, in my opinion. We're kind of talking semantics at this point. It doesn't really matter too much. So next we're going to be looking at Eastern plate carriers, but with a class 2 soft backing in C tier, and this is going to start with the Korund. So this used to be a class 5 armor back in the day, but now it's just a plate carrier with class 2 armor. The Korund does at least have neck protection and groin protection as well, and you can stick in up to class 5 plates, but these are all of the Eastern form factor, and so the problem with that is that the Eastern plates don't protect as much of the thorax as the Western ones, which is why I've got them lower down in this tiering. We have the 6B23-2 as well, which is very similar to the Korund. The only difference really is that the Korund can take actual side plates, while the 6B23-2 can take either the diamond-shaped plate or the regular Korund plate. So it's a little bit more flexible, but you get a bit more protection on the Korund itself. We also have the 6B23-1, which takes exactly the same set of plates as the Korund, but it is lighter, but it doesn't take side plates. So it really depends on exactly what you want to mix and match here. These are all kind of interchangeable depending on how little protection you want versus full protection and how much weight you want to have. After this, we have the Press, which again is another Eastern style plate front. This one takes the diamond shaped plate, but it does take a Western sappy plate in the back. You also get class 2 neck protection with it. This makes it very similar to the 6B13, which is almost the same. A diamond-shaped plate in the top, neck protection, but you also get a bit of groin as well. But you have the bespoke backplate for this, which is a little more awkward than on the Press. So on balance, I think I prefer the Press armor to the 6B13. Finally here we have the Bagari. This is another one that can take side plates and also takes these Korund style plates as well, but it doesn't have any neck protection, which is why I've ended up putting it last on the list. Given that it's so similar to all of the others, not having neck is probably the bigger disadvantage in this particular situation versus the others down in the C tier. Now, given that we were talking about the difference between Western and Eastern carriers, rank B is primarily going to be Western carriers that have a class 2 soft backing instead. So this is the direct tier up from C, and the first one here, which I think is probably the best one of that particular category, is the Osprey Assault. This one has shoulder protection as well as neck protection, which is pretty nice and can stop some bullets coming through the arms and minimizes the damage to your thorax, which is why I kind of prioritize shoulder protection and neck protection more than anything else, because it really impacts upon your life and death situations. After this, I really don't mind the Cuirass actually. You can't put any side plates in, but you do get class 2 neck and its sappy plates front and back. Another big advantage about using Western plates is if the front plate gets damaged, you can take the front plate out, put the back plate in the front and the front plate in the back, and then you can carry on as if you had full front armor, which is really cool, and you can't do that with the Eastern ones. Not these ones in the C tier anyway. After this, we have all of the rest of the regular ones that cover the thorax but don't give you any neck protection. The Eclipse at least has side plates as a possibility. You also get groin protection too. The M1 has side plates but no groin protection, and again no neck. The same thing with the M2 and the same thing with the AVS, although you can't put side plates in the AVS and you only get this front groin protection, which is why I rated it slightly lower than these other two. The final two in this category are the Trooper with literally just front and back protection, but it does have soft armor that protects the thorax, and the same for the OTV. These two are almost identical. Now, the next two is kind of controversial because it really depends on what you weight as more important or less important, but I've ended up putting the Zabralo and the Redoute T5 in this category at the end of the B tier. Obviously, these armors are quite different to the others within this particular category, but because these both have a move speed penalty of over 10% as a baseline, I've ended up putting them here because I just don't really want to wear them as my top end armor. You have to remember that all the plates actually have their own debuffs on as well, and with a base move speed debuff of minus 13.5% for the Redoute T5 and 11.5% for the Zabralo, this is really high already, and that's with no plates whatsoever. Yes, for both of these you get class 3 soft armor protection all over, but I just don't think that that makes up for the lack of mobility, because these days having class 3 everywhere rather than class 6 like it used to be is a serious change in the protective abilities that they give you, and it just isn't worth giving up 10% move speed for. If you are looking for class 3 protection though, the Zabralo has all soft armor hitboxes covered except for the buttocks, and the Reduc T5 has all soft armor hitboxes covered except for the back of the neck. This one only has throat, which is an important one to remember. So if you get hit in the back of the neck from behind with the Reduc T5, you will die because it doesn't have class 3 soft armor protection there. This is quite a big downside for this armor. So next up, in the A tier, we're going to look at the Eastern armors that have class 3 soft armor. And the first one here is the Juk Digital, as it is now called. The 6A used to refer to the class of protection, but now that it's all modular, that doesn't make sense anymore. And we also have the Gazelle and we have the Killer armor. Now, the only differences really between these is that the Juk 6A has very slightly better soft armor protection than the Gazelle in terms of durability, but the durability on Aramid doesn't really matter. We have to remember that the destructibility stat for Aramid is ridiculous, so the number of durability points that you see in game, you have to multiply by 5.333 to get to the effective durability, which is just insane for pretty much everything. A piece of Aramid soft armor with 50 durability points is well over 260 effective durability, which is a lot and isn't going to get eroded fast enough for it to matter at the end of the day. The form factor of these armors is very similar to the press, so we've got a class 3 backing instead of the class 2 from the Juk 3, but we can take side plates on these and we get a sappy back. So yes, we have to take the diamond plate at the front, but we have a regular Western style backplate. This is the biggest problem with the Killer armor. If you want a good backplate, you have to get it from Killer himself. You can't actually buy the decent one, and you have to go down to class 4 if you want to get a new backplate versus the class 5 that he comes with. There's really no way to replace this, which means that these two are much more consistent and stable. The Killer armor also doesn't support any side plates either, so both the Juk and the Gazelle allow you to protect with plates all the way around. The next one that I'm going to put in this tier might be slightly controversial, which is the Thor. Now, this one, I don't think it deserves to be an S tier because it doesn't have neck and it doesn't have shoulder and it has no groin protection as well. So the protection that it gives is relatively limited, but it has a class 3 underlay in terms of the soft armor and it uses Western plates. These Western plates and the better protection over the thorax, I did say was my preference, and so I feel like it's kind of similar and fits into this category too. I think the Thor Concealable is really good if you're focusing on PvP because class 2 or 3 soft armor around the neck probably doesn't really make much difference against most of the bullets that those players are wielding. Whereas being able to use the Western plates is more important, and being able to have side armor as well stops you from getting hit in the stomach. Another one that is really tricky to place is the Ulay. This is the 6B515 Ulay, and I have ended up putting it into A on balance because this is the only armor in the game that gives you class 4 protection across the entirety of your front and the entirety of your back. You don't get any side protection, but it's worth bearing in mind that no armor defends the thorax from the side. It's only the stomach that can be defended from the side, and so that doesn't really matter as much. You do get a little bit of groin protection, which again is the stomach hitbox, but you also get class 2 around the neck. Now, there is a difference between plates and non-plates. We've seen from the tests that we've done so far that plates themselves have the ability to absorb super high tier ammo, whereas the class 4 in the old system, which is what soft armor uses, doesn't do that. If you shoot somebody with 7.62 BP who is wearing a Ulay, it's probably going to go straight through, whereas even if you're wearing a class 3 plate, then sometimes the BP round just simply doesn't go through at all. But I think the fact that you have class 4 across your entire thorax area is a little step up above everything else in its own special way. Obviously, against high pen rounds, it's not as good, but against anything that's under 40 pen, you might actually have a small advantage in some situations with the Ulay over something like the Thor. This is where trying to place this one is very tricky. The Ulay is in its own special little slot. It's really the only armor like this, so it's really weird. You could put it here, you might even put it down into C. If you're playing against high-end players in PvP, you could put it in B on balance, but I'm going to put it in A just because I think for most players, it's one of the more consistent armors because you have the same armor class across everything. Now, the two other armors that I'm putting in here as well is the Gen 4 Full and the Thor Integrated. For the same reasons as for the Zabralo and the Reduc T5, I can't put them in S tier simply because the 8% movement debuff is too much. But these two do give good protection, and they're not as bad in terms of stats as these two. So the Gen 4 Full is the only armor in the game that I'm aware of that gives soft armor protection across every single hitbox. You get all the regular ones, thorax, stomach, sides, but you also get groin, and you get buttocks as well because of the flap at the back, and you get neck, but you get the proper neck. You get both throat and you get back of the neck as well. So you can't be shot in the back of the head and die like you can with the Reduc T5. The Thor Integrated is very similar. This has almost all of the hitboxes except for the buttocks hitbox, which is missing, versus the Gen 4 Full, but it's very similar, and that's quite an unlikely hitbox to hit anyway. You can still use any of the Western plates in both of these, which is really my preference, and so I don't think they're too bad, but as long as you can deal with the 8% move speed and a little bit of turn and ergo debuff as well, then they can be okay. So finally, onto the S tier armors, and I think that this one is probably the best armor in the entire game, which is the Osprey Protection. It has full thorax protection of class 3, it uses Western plates as well for that maximum thorax coverage. You get neck hitbox at class 3 as well, and you also get shoulders. The shoulders don't directly protect the thorax, but if you get shot in the arm, it can minimize the damage if a round passes right through your arm and into your chest, and it can stop you getting 2 shots and make it so that you're a 3-shot kill instead. So yeah, I think the Osprey is really good. I think the Gen 4 Assault is probably the next best. This one's not quite as good in terms of debuffs, but it's still a seriously decent armor. After this, we then have the Gen 4 Mobility. This still gives you the full neck protection, and you don't get shoulder, but you get groin and buttocks instead. So it depends on what you're fighting against. Sometimes this will save you, sometimes the arms will save you. You could argue in theory that the groin and the buttocks is more important because the stomach propagates more damage through than the arms, but I'm more interested in the shoulder protection as passive protection against the chest. So that's why I put this as the next tier down. Then we've got the Reduced M, which is very similar to the Gen 4 Mobility, except this one doesn't protect the back of the neck. This is the same as with the Reduced T5 that we talked about a moment ago, and it's the same for the Defender. The Defender also doesn't protect buttocks though. So this one has everything except the back of the neck, and this one has everything except the buttocks and the back of the neck. Now, obviously, not everybody is going to be able to access these straight away, and until you get to level 4 traders, you can't get most of these armors. You have to buy them off the flea market, and it ends up being quite expensive. So in terms of bang for buck and the ones that I really like, I really do love the Thor for PvP. I think this is very, very good. You can get access to this relatively early on Ragman, and it is pretty cheap. The Osprey Assault is also decent. Western plates, you get shoulder protection too, which is really cool, and the Cuirass as well is good. This is one of the cheaper armors in the game that gives you pretty much all the protection that you need, but you can't put in any side plates, so you won't be protected on your stomach from all around your player character. I think between these three, you can't really go wrong, to be honest. One final point to make sure that you remember is that when you're comparing between these armors, soft armor protects the entire hitbox that it says that it is going to protect. So if it says neck, it protects the whole neck. If it says throat only, it only protects the front and not the back. This really helps to cut down a lot of the noise around these armors and compare them more evenly to each other, because once you realize that it's not strictly on exactly what it looks like, then this makes it a lot easier to figure out what's going on and to just junk this bottom set. If we come full circle and go back and look at all of these plate carriers, there's really no reason to use these because you can get armors like the Cuirass that give you class 2 on the neck. There's no need to use something that isn't going to protect your thorax with at least class 2 armor. The Cuirass is so cheap on the flea market, if you get any of these armors, you can basically just pull the plates out, sell them to Ragman, buy a Cuirass, put them in there instead, and you will genuinely be better off. So if you're interested in looking at some more cheap early game kits, go and look at my video on budget loadouts next. Otherwise, as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, and as always, have fun in your raids.